There's no.
What? Yeah, it is. 230. Really? Yeah. 186.
Okay, now I have the notes today, only one side. David, grab the lights, please. That's not a correct response. I thought you said, I don't know, when I said grab the lights. I said, that's not really a... Okay, so if I look at these notes, these are 4.2. So put 4.2 on the corner, because once again, I say this every time we start notes, I will be checking all of Unit 4 notes when we, in a couple weeks. The Unit 4 will take a while, but I will be checking Unit 4 notes when we do the study guide probably over Unit 4. So make sure you keep these in a folder. If you want to keep the folder in my closet over there, I don't care, or keep it someplace else. But I am numbering these. This is the second lesson of Unit 4, so 4.2. So what we're going to look at today, yesterday we talked about slope, and we said what was the kind of the basic definition of slope. We had a couple definitions. What was some of the definitions that I gave you for slope?
Y equals mx plus b.
Nope, that doesn't really tell me what slope is. If I say what is slope, that doesn't tell me what slope is. Slope, we used m to represent slope. We talked about that yesterday. What else did I tell you about slope yesterday?
y2 minus y1 over x1.
We talked about the slope formula. The slope formula, like we did on the warm-up, is how we find the slope if I give you 2 points. Okay. How else did I define slope as? Yes. Rise over run. If I gave you a graph and you did 2 points and you did rise over run, you guys did well with it yesterday. We also talked about slope as what? Just a basic definition. Slope is the what? What of a line? Also starts with an S. Steepness. So when I talk about slope, all I'm talking about is how steep this line is. So the higher the slope, the steeper the line. And we're going to look more at that when we actually start graphing. But before we start graphing, we are going to look at 2 ways that I can represent slope. John? John? Pass. John? Pass. Okay, so we are going to look at 2 ways we can represent lines. We are looking at linear equations. Linear has the word line in it. So if I am talking about a linear equation, I am talking about an equation that will give me a line when I graph it. And we're going to graph this on Thursday. We don't have notes tomorrow. Tomorrow's an Alex day. But Thursday we are going to graph these equations. These are linear equations. So these are equations that will give me lines when I graph them. There are 2 equations I'm going to look at today. First of all, the slope-intercept formula, which is by far the one you guys are most familiar with, because I've already heard you guys say it like 5 times. Slope-intercept form? No, that's the slope formula. Slope y equals mx plus b. This is the one you guys are most familiar with. This is the easiest one to work with because it's in the name. It tells you the slope and the y-intercept just by looking at it. So if you have it in this form, it's easy because you can easily find the slope and you can easily find the y-intercept. It's in the name, slope-intercept form. M, like we talked about yesterday, is my slope. So if you look at where m is at, any number, whatever number is in front of x, is my slope. That's the nice thing about slope-intercept form, is because you can just look at it and say whatever number is in front of x, well, that's my slope. Whatever number is not with the x, which in this case is the b value, whichever number is not with the x is my y-intercept. And we'll talk about what the y-intercept means Thursday. But this form is used a lot because it's really easy to use. You just look at it and say, well, my slope's in front of x and my y-intercept is the number not with x. And that's all I do. So if I look at the first part on the left, given the following information, write the linear equation in slope-intercept form. So it tells you right in the directions. If I want it in slope-intercept form, I want it to look like y equals mx plus b. If they tell you what form to put it in the directions, then I would just jot it down, y equals mx plus b. I give you the slope and the y-intercept. So let's plug it in as all you're doing. My slope is m. It always goes where?
First.
Not necessarily first. Always goes where? Look at you. M always goes where? Before x. So don't think about it as first and second, because sometimes they might be switched. Your slope is m, it goes in front of x. So if I give you the slope, all you do is plug it in front of x. The y-intercept is b, and that just goes usually at the end, but not always. That just goes kind of the number without the x. So all you do is you take your slope, plug it in front of x, and your y-intercept goes without the x. So y equals 2x minus 1. And that is in slope-intercept form because it is y equals. That's how I tell if it's slope-intercept form, because it's y equals. Okay, let's look at 2. I give you the slope of negative 3/5 and the y-intercept of 4. Real quick, if my slope is a negative 3/5, what do I know is happening with this line? Yeah, so I know my line is doing what we talked about yesterday. Going down. If it's a negative slope, it's going downhill. So if I write it in slope-intercept form, it's going to be y equals what? Negative 3/5 what? X. My y-intercept is 4, so it's going to be plus 4. All you do, if you give you the slope and the y-intercept, the slope always goes in front of x. The y-intercept always goes without the x, so plus 4. If I look at 4 real quick, the slope is negative 1, the y-intercept is 7. It's going to be going downhill because my slope is negative. If I plug those in, it's going to look like what? Y equals negative 1x. You don't really need the 1. So just negative x, keep going, plus 7. That's it. Do not make these harder than they are. If I look at 5, my slope is a 4th. My y-intercept is 0. So what will that one look like?
Y equals 1/4 x.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, you could put plus 0, but we don't need to. So that's just y equals 1/4 x. Okay? And then number 6 real quick. Y equals, what would that one look like? Negative 5/2 x. Slope is always in front of x. And then what? Minus 3. Yep, that's it. Good. So this first part is not anything super complicated. Okay, so let me pass out homework. You can get started on it, and then we'll finish. The second part will be a little trickier, but oh well, you can at least get the first part.